Signs of the Southland, Sunday, January 30th, 2022. Mr. Grant, we are on a bit of a bootleg setup today, aren't we?
Even more bootleg than usual, yes.
Uh, totally high fidelity audio, as we always like to provide. Why don't we jump right into it?
I
Let's
was gonna
start.
go ahead.
Oh, you wanna get in a word first?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say none more bootleg of good timing than seeing Dabo Swinney throwing Cheez-Its at as confetti falls, thanks to the ACC network. But
ACC Network is truly a world of whimsy, wonder, and asking a lot of why. We'll get to that. Georgia Tech women's basketball is currently in the third quarter. Let's give us a score update here as we start.
well, Sarah Bates just hit her. Let me check that millionth three of the day. She she is at least 5 for 12. I don't know if the live score did update. So yeah, she's 5 for 12 from three, which seems like a lot of threes, but given that she's 15 of Tech's 37 points with 5.5 minutes to play in the third quarter, kind of necessary. Not gonna lie.
I mean, it would help if you gave the opponent's score as
Oh
well.
yeah, they just got a bucket. They have 31.
Okay, 37-31. We'll check back in that once we get to women's basketball later on. But first on the slate, let's talk about swim and dive. First on the docket in the swim and dive department is the women's team. They swam off against Arkansas and Tulane on Friday to kick off the weekend. They got past Tulane, but not Arkansas, which is weird because one of those is a body of water, the other one is a land mammal. I don't know. Like, you're mixing a lot of metaphors here. Mackenzie Campbell won her 200 IM, got an NCAA B cut at just a tick under 2 minutes for a program record. Brooke Switzer won the 200 free and the 500 free. Cameron Dalgo with another stellar diving performance, this time winning the 1 meter dives. The only note that I have that's not analysis related is that this was on TV. Like, I was watching this. I had this on in the background on Friday. It was neat to have this on and catch some swimming during the workday.
Yeah. Question, because I know all the home meets are on ACC Network Extra. Was this on the main ACC network? Or
No. It was ACC Network Extra. Don't get your hopes up.
I was going to say no, but it will be on mainstream TV, at least on some sort of delay, I think, for the ACC championships, and then the obviously the ESPN contract about NCAA championships. So good that we have that production facility, because they're definitely going to be putting it to good use in February.
Oh yeah, the graphics were not. I mean, it wasn't like a fully produced NBC doing the Olympic style broadcast, right? It was just They did some overlays on each lanes. They marked down who finished. They had like a time, like they kept a stopwatch in the bottom corner, that kind of thing. But even that, I mean, improvement from most stuff.
I was gonna say that's better than it was last time I tuned in. But the main thing that I have here in terms of my notes, I'm drinking water and I almost choked on some ice there. My apologies. My
Great audio
is we don't usually get a chance to talk about this, and Mackenzie Campbell's 200 IM record gives us a great opportunity to dive in. You noted that it was just a tick under 2 minutes, and that's really important, at least in my experience as a swimmer. Or not necessarily important, but the psychology of getting under those big barriers, whether that's you're 10 or 12 and you're trying to get under 30 seconds in the 50 free, or subsequent second marks in the 50 and the 100 free, or various short distances, or those bigger minute barriers in the 200, the 500. I remember my first time under 5 minutes in the 500 freestyle, or my first time under 2 in the 200, when high school, middle school aged Jake was still in the thick of swimming. Those were big deals, and it's also like a obviously, once you do a certain time or certain measure in a track and field or swimming, those time and distance and, milestone based events, the fact that you can do it is a big thing. And I don't know. Hopefully this kind of opens the floodgates, or at least shows that she's in the mix for maybe some points in that event at NCAA's in a couple of weeks.
I got to say, opening the floodgates in a swimming pool might not be the best idea, but I do understand the premise and the sentiment. It's a really good performance. I think those milestone numbers that transcends just the swimming and sort of the time tracked and distance track sports, right? Because you can see that in something like soccer or football. Once you hit a certain milestone, I think soccer is a pretty good example of this. Once you get one goal in a game, once you the rest of the game sort of opens up, teams are more willing to either sit back once they have that goal, or the opponent is willing to get after it a little bit more just to get back in the game. It changes the dynamics of competition. And I guess you're talking about career milestones and
individual performance milestones. What I was talking about, yeah. But I think, wow, that was a great reverse layup by Lorella Kubai. Well, we can unbox men's basketball a little bit more in a bit, but I think it's kind of similar to what we've been saying about Miles Kelly, and particularly most of this year of him maybe not getting a lot of minutes and trying to make the most of his minutes. And he's taking good shots, but they just haven't fallen yet. You have one of those games. Look at Tristan Maxwell, how that one game against Boston College kind of changed or reestablished his trajectory right on the flats. And it's a belief thing. You can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, or why not? But.
Absolutely. It's a lightning rod, right? It's a jolt of energy to the system. Let's move on to Saturday, a men's and women's matinee at Macaulay Aquatic Center versus Gardner Webb. This was also senior day, a bunch of senior day wins here as Tech thoroughly demolished Gardner Webb. You have a couple notes here about how every Tech swim was an exhibition after a couple events here.
Yeah, so not after a couple. There was like 32 events on the day, and the last 6 Tech pushed all of their races to be exhibitions. So if you look at the score and you're like, that seems kind of close. Well, that's because Gardner Webb was taking 100% of the points in a couple relays and a couple
garbage time.
Yes, it quite literally was the definition of garbage time play. But no, it was good. It was the first time actually that we'd seen a couple notable names in the pool for Tech in quite a while. But it was good to see Berke Saka, Batur Onlu, Kaya Paputis, Christian Ferraro, some of the names that, there hasn't been a meet since that weird Miami Northwestern one. And those guys weren't in the pool for that. So good to see them. We had a couple scratches among athletes, healthy scratches, after a couple of, you can't commit that foul. That's pretty intentional looking, AC.
This is amazing live audio as he mixes strings here.
I'm trying not to commit a rights violation here, but yeah, no, good to see some of our international swimmers back for the first time in a while. And that's probably the main takeaway there. It's senior day, so you saw a lot of seniors swimming their, not necessarily dream events, but, if it's your last meet on the flats and you always want to swim the 100 fly or something like that, it's the time to go ahead and do it and get them their moment in the sun. So good to see that. I don't have a ton more in terms of takeaways there. The Jackets won. Like they did what they needed to do, and they did it pretty convincingly. And that really wraps up the dual meet season for them. So
yeah, absolutely. So you have on here next week or soon, I guess their next meet is the Yellow Jacket Invite, and that is a tune-up for the ACC championships, which are on consecutive weekends. I forget the exact weekends, and then the NCAA championships for men and women, which are on consecutive weekends. All of that action is at Macaulay. So busy next month and a half.
Yeah, a lot of good swimming coming up. I believe Yellow Jacket Invite is like Valentine's Day time,
2 weeks.
Yeah, 13th, 14th, and then either next week or 2 weeks after that, you start the ACCs, and then after that's NCAAs. So we kind of unboxed that on our last column, and we'll preview particularly NC2As once we know what those cuts look like in terms of ACCs. It'd be nice to see Tech in the mix higher up, but we said that last year and kind of petered out a little bit. But ACC is great at all the swimming, tennis, golf, men's and women's basketball, like that. It's for a very underrated amount of sports. It's the best place in the world to find that kind of competition. So, kind of got to do what you got to do.
Right, absolutely. So, speaking of swimming, speaking of time-based sports, let's talk about a sport that has often been considered swimming, but on a dirt road, a dirt track. Track is the next one up on our list. Georgia Tech was at the Bob Pollock Invite hosted by Clemson University. Some highlights as follows. Nicole Fegan's got another record. I think she broke her own mile time. I don't have a first name in front of me for the pole vault, so I'm going to let you vamp on that. Tech won a 5,000 meter race. This also was on TV. Well, ACC Network Extra, but a lot of good competition this weekend if you're interested in watching Tech while you're on the workday. It was very interesting.
Yeah, that would be Olivia Moore, second in the pole vault.
You really need to give me more to work with on the highlights, right? I pun not intended, but also like first names. Come on.
She wins like every pole vault, or gets second or third in every pole vault in the last 2 years. I figure you'd know at this point, but shame on me.
I'm bad with names.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a miracle I know yours. And some might even consider that I only know your last name at this point.
Olivia Moore, Nicole Fegans led the way there. The big notes I have here were it didn't seem as like I don't know. I don't really understand who, how, or why track and field picks which events get included in which meets. But we did see, I believe, the distance medley for the first time this year in the meet. So that was interesting. But really, it's hard to compare apples to apples on this. And one of the things that we do, at least me writing some of this stuff, rely on is the USTFCCCA. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Jesus Christ.
Automated. It's the U.S. Track and Field and Cross Country Coaches Association, like numerical rankings that they do. In order to try and compare apples to apples. But the men were unranked out of 155 teams on a list. So a little confused why we don't have a number there. Granted, I have not dove in too much to the ins and outs of the mathematical model that they put that together with, but the women were sitting at 80, again a little bit lower than expected, but I don't have a great meter stick, honestly, heading into kind of this final stretch before ACC indoors. My hope, though, given that Tech will be sending some to an elite invite this weekend, that would give us at least a little bit more insight heading into the final stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that elite invite. So this next week looks like another split squad, Blacksburg and then Winston-Salem. So two separate squads there. And as you mentioned, it's 4 weeks from now until the ACC Indoor Championships. Do you know where that's hosted? Is it Notre Dame again?
That is a great question. I thought it might be in Blacksburg, but let me do a double check because I do not.
I mean, it's certainly not here because I don't know if you've looked outside recently, but Griffin Track is not an indoor facility.
Yeah, that I appreciate that. Up to date and always intentional. Great observation from you, and that's why this is a great podcast. But it is in fact in Blacksburg, and Lorella Kubai just rolled a ball around and around and around on a long mid-range jumper for two right at the buzzer to end the third quarter. So Tech only being up by 5 is a little concerning. We'll dive into that in a sec. And my apologies for, the back and forth on that. But yeah, we're going to Blacksburg.
High fidelity audio. High fidelity audio. Blacksburg ACC Indoor Championships. You have one more note on that?
Yep. So next week, split Winston-Salem, Blacksburg. Week after that, split Clemson and Nashville. And then going back to Winston-Salem for another DMR Invitational. So perhaps we see Winston-Salem a lot. Just going to be driving up 85 towards Greensboro a lot in the next couple weeks.
I'm told that Wake is a powerhouse in a lot of sports these days, so got to respect it. He's nodding. He's shaking his head no, as if he doesn't believe
that one lying where it is.
It's fine. Let's move on to sports that Wake Forest is good at, namely tennis. Women's tennis coming in this week was ranked 12th. We talked about that last week. After the events of this weekend, notably the ITA kickoff, they might take a little bit of a hit to that ranking. They lost 4-3 to Old Dominion and then 4-3 again to Michigan. Notable results here. Bilchev lost twice, got upset twice, talented freshman. She was actually the last match playing versus Michigan today. Really just got a tough break in 3 sets. You have one more note on a former jacket here as well. Victoria Flores is crushing it in Pepperdine colors, you say.
Yep. And that's tough. They're a really good team. And we don't disparage anyone for taking that last year of eligibility to go get that next degree that they maybe can't get at Tech. That is a fact of life. But yeah, no, tough weekend at ITAs. Honestly, did not follow the ODU match live. And when I saw we were matched up with Michigan, I just kind of assumed we won because Michigan was also supposed to win against Ole Miss. It was very much the anti-chalk week in Atlanta, I believe. Yeah, ODU was winning when I checked the ODU Ole Miss, not rankings, live score. After the doubles point, they were winning. So if they wound up pulling that off, that would mean that every match of the weekend came up as an upset. So maybe something's just in the water. But yeah, definitely a bit tough. 0-2 is not the way you want to start the season. At the same time, Tech did go 2-3 in ITA competition last year, I believe, going 2-0 to make it to nationals and then taking 3 losses at nationals, which again is really tough. But with how good the ACC is, how good Tech is, and how fair we schedule, we just got to get above 500 and get into the tournament from there. That's really the main thing, is improving throughout the year. And like we said, it's kind of flipping the narrative on its head with the men's team the past couple of years. We've been, okay, they're young, they need to figure out how to win, how to hold on, while the women have been the experienced, old, hyper-talented, Sweet 16, Final Four-esque team. And it's time for that script to flip. So the women are going to have to figure it out. There's definitely some new leaders at the top, but they're deep. They'll figure it out. I'm pretty confident in that.
Yeah, I think new leaders at the top is also really important here because, again, you're replacing your top 2 singles players and also your top doubles pairing going into this year, right? So you're looking at a lot of rotation, and this is still early in the season, even just in terms of matches played, because they had a couple of matches canceled because of COVID earlier this month. So I think you're totally right in that. Look for them to develop throughout the year. We saw it last year too with the bottom part of that lineup, the non-Flores and the non-Jones parts of that lineup slowly making their way to being really, really competitive towards the end of the season. So that's what we need to see from the whole group as a whole as we move forward towards March and May.
Yep, and they definitely did get better last year. And like you said, you bump some players up a court or 2 courts at least on the single side. No matter who you're bringing in, it's them getting used to the speed of the game and quality of competition, and that's okay too. And then one more note: I do just want to reiterate that the Kenya Jones and Vicky Flores doubles team was a top two pairing almost all of last year. So again, we just want reasonable expectations, and I think the reasonable expectation for this team is going to get better, and then hopefully make it to the big dance.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk about what's ahead for the women, let's talk about the men's side of things. They were ranked number 29, still in the receiving votes category coming into this week. They had a little bit of a better weekend at ITA kickoffs. They were up in Charlottesville. They dispatched Middle Tennessee State 4-2, and then lost a closer than it seems match to UVA, host UVA. And I think UVA was also ranked number 7 in the ITA seeding chart coming in. So interesting pair of results here. Where do you want to start?
I think you're right. 7 in seed, 6 in rank, or something. Mm-hmm. 6 in poll, but between
very good poll, is the short version.
Yeah, UVA is absolutely a threat to win the conference this year, and like we said, the ACC is the place to be playing college tennis. So no shame in that. The place I would like to start is the MTSU results. Obviously, that is the win. That's the fun place to start, and I think it really speaks kind of more to the theme of what we can expect the rest of the year. Georgia Tech did drop the doubles point, which again has kind of been our weakness this year. If anything, we were able to see our number 3 ranked pairing of Martin and McDaniel, Andres Martin and Marcus McDaniel, defeat Pavel Motul and Stijn Slump. I really hope I said that correctly. 6-1 on court 1. It was dominating. They are amazing. They could win the doubles bracket of the doubles draw this year for the NC2A. And then a close loss on 2 by Chopra and Shelcher. It was 7-5. So tough to lose that, but they turned around and took 4 of 5 singles courts. So that is definitely a solid place to be in terms of singles play. All of those wins, all those 4 wins were in 2 sets as well. So not bad. And then that loss did come down on 6. So you saw your top performers giving you exactly what you expect and what you need. The match that did not finish was Chopra on 2, and that he was winning in the second set when that happened. So all good. Of course, I don't know if you have any more detail you want to pepper in there, but you kind of have to do the yin and the yang for UVA versus MTSU.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to just talk about what the next couple of weeks looks like for both of these teams. Women's tennis will host Northwestern next Sunday, and then the men will head back to their normal schedule. They have Auburn on the 4th of February, and they will travel to Columbia on the 6th of February. I think both of those dates are next week. I think the end of this coming week. So busy slate. Give me a little bit about what to expect from these 3 games.
Yeah, Northwestern's a pretty common out-of-conference matchup for the women, as are Auburn and Carolina for the men. And yes, South Carolina does get to be Carolina for a full year. Thank you, bowl game. But
you got dunked in Mayo.
Yeah,
can't beat it.
Northwestern, very solid team. Usually a ITA final round type quality team. That'll be great to see. And hopefully we take the win there. We do need to start picking up some wins, but definitely fine. I think that should tell us a little bit more about the team, and that's just what they got to do is learn a little bit every week. In terms of Auburn and South Carolina, Auburn and South Carolina are both solid SEC type programs. Great to see them in here after starting off with the old Citadel Georgia State 1-2 combo. But in terms of the general quality, South Carolina is ranked 13th. They're very good, and Auburn is a Power 5 team. So South Carolina is definitely the tricky one that's on the road as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about another team on campus that's had some tricky games as of late. That would be men's basketball. I'm really killing it with the segues today. They surprisingly beat Florida State. And then the yin and the yang, as you said earlier, they were played a very weird game versus Miami this past Saturday. So let's start with the Florida State game. You were there. What was the atmosphere like? What did you see that surprised you?
I gotta reiterate this. Our fan turnout, other than the students, has been pretty terrible this year. I don't like to be that negative energy, but this was probably the second or third game where we were noticeably equal or outnumbered by an opponent in terms of attendance. And Florida State fans were very loud and made their presence known. Is their right, buy the tickets, give us money. Thank you. Thank you for the win. But in terms of, general atmosphere, it was a 9 p.m. game, which is definitely a limitation and definitely keeps away.
It's awful. The 9 p.m. slot needs to be banned. There needs to be like a Geneva Accord or like a line in the Geneva Convention that says you can't do 9 p.m. basketball tips in the United States.
If we are going to be personal and opinionated there, I'm going to take the devil's advocate. I love the 9 p.m. games. Gives me time for a nice civilized dinner after work, but I also live walking distance from campus. So definitely easier for me to make the trip in.
I also live walking distance from campus, and I'm complaining about the 9 p.m. tips.
So you're closer than I am too. But
unbelievable.
Anyways, no. Okay, sorry. Women's basketball is getting too close.
We're getting there.
We are, and we might need to stall a little bit so we can get to the end of this game. But in terms of the actual gameplay, Georgia Tech was it was a very competitive game. I wouldn't say either team was terribly dominant for either half. I don't know. That's sounds a little bit silly when you win by 14. Obviously, there is a necessary, I guess, caveat, if you will, that Georgia Tech was leading at the end of the first half. Probably could have been by more, but they did pound the paint, add to the lead right at the end of the first half, and they put enough foot on the gas, enough of their foot on the gas in a much less high scoring second half to stay in front and even increase the lead a little bit. I think the main thing there was, Tech had a swagger. Tech was feeling it. Florida State plays a super deep bench, huge rotations. 11 players saw minutes.
They're also massive. Each one of those players is just like 7'4" with just massive wingspans. All of them.
Yep.
Not a single one is normal sized.
Yep. And it was a pretty evenly paced night. Like Florida State has made their reputation on being a well-balanced team. I think their leading scorer at 11 points. That would be their number 2. He went 4 for 8 from the field. So, efficient as well. I don't know. Like we didn't hold them to particularly poor shooting. They went 41-ish% from both the field and from 3. They're kind of bad from the free throw line, 62.5% for 16 attempts. We did take a fair bit more trips to the line than them. We were 17 for 24 for 71% shooting. Again, neither of those numbers being all that particularly good. I think a more notable thing from them was their 17 turnovers. And I think that is something along the lines of, and I have no way to actually confirm this, so don't actually quote me on this, but that seems to me like a Jose Alvarado called and said, remember what we did last year, or Pastner saying, hey, look at this old game tape. This is how we made our bread and butter, was forcing Florida State to make mistakes and definitely taking advantage of that. We had 13 steals, forced 17 turnovers. Like I said, that's pretty darn good,
Hmm. And I mean, this is what, like the third win over FSU in the last calendar year, and FSU's not like no slouch either.
Yeah, including that ACC tournament win. Part of it's talent, part of it's coaching, part of it's luck. But Georgia Tech has just had their number, and both of those wins were incredibly important last year. You'd think, based on the nice improvement and the defeat of a 13-6, 6-3 in conference Florida State team by 75-61 margin, so 14 points. You'd think that kind of has Tech with some momentum, but I think the Miami game shows that, this team is still growing and getting better. And I think that is kind of, it folds in nicely to the narrative we've kind of established, if you will, the past couple of weeks in terms of both what we've seen and what we've expected on the year. You think that makes sense or no?
No, absolutely. It's what we expected on the year was just a slight step back, right? We talked about this a lot last week. We expected sort of a slight step back. Yeah, they're losing. They're losing so many minutes. They're losing two really key players, but at the same time, they're bringing a bunch of the core players back. They're bringing together one of Pastor's best recruiting classes, if not the best recruiting classes. So we expect regression, but we don't expect serious regression. And I think what we've seen this year isn't necessarily. I think it's obviously regression, right? And we said it last week, these performances are not necessarily good, especially when you talk about the Miami one, which was within reach. But at the same time, I think you also have, and this is sort of the same side of the coin, it's the inconsistency, right? I think one of the things that we say to bring, I guess, football into it, it's like one of the things that we point and laugh at Scott Frost is for having a really crappy record in one-score games. Right. But at the end of the day, a lot of those one-score games that Nebraska is in are coin flips. Right. Mm-hmm. Nebraska's not out here getting dumpstered and then dumpstered for three quarters and then bringing the game close at the end of the fourth quarter. They're just
that
getting
narrative
outplayed.
Could apply to a different team on campus, but we'll save that for the fall.
They're in it until the very end. They're in it consistently. And I think that's what Georgia Tech has done for a lot of these, right? And it's something that I was talking to another person about. They are always in these games. And I think we've seen that pretty consistently. They're in these games up until a certain point, and then everything sort of just crumbles. And it's the same story every game, other than, I guess, like the FSU one, other than a couple others we can pick nits here and there. But in general, that's sort of the narrative of how some of these losses go, right?
I think that's painting with too broad of a brush. I don't want to push back too hard because I think there's some truth to it. And, we've had the pre halftime discussion, or just a cold snap pulls you out of it. But in terms of what we've seen and folding into both Florida State applies to the first one, but definitely Miami in the second is we don't have a functional big man that can compete at the ACC level. I think Rodney has gotten better. Rodney Howard's gotten better. I think Saba's gotten better. And I think Jordan Mecca has a lot of talent. But I don't think either of them can replace and we've talked about this too, right? The Lammers straight to James Banks, straight to
Moses Wright. They developed Moses
Wright. Of nature. And Moses, even then, wasn't a true big man, right? He was a stretch four, playing a five position because he needed to. Pastner's team.
Hey. Positionless basketball is the new hotness. All right. Don't need to put labels on any of this.
Yeah. Well, I have gotten the feedback that we don't talk enough technical terms sometimes, and trying to, show that we actually do know what we talk about.
Scheme. You're a scheme person now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But Tech is not blessed to be in the same position that we have been in the past, quite frankly. And Pastner's talked about the difficulty of saying, and this speaks to his character as a person, to be able to say, like, Moses, the job is yours if you want to come back. Jose, the job is yours if you want to come back, and how that translates into the transfer market in particular. Because much like we talk about in football, transfers have changed college sports, with
Mhm.
football and basketball being the most drastic and most different. But even still, we're seeing it in volleyball, looking at some of the stuff that's happened after the season there. Obviously, grad transfers have been a thing for a while now in sports, and that's we could
And I mean,
we could point to
if I
Andy
remember
Archer and Vicky
correctly.
Flores and talk about grad transfers, but it's tough. We don't have a big man, and the other point that I was going to make here, I promise, I talk long winded on this, but the other point is the production we see from the point guard position has been not Jose Alvarado and not consistent. Granted, you don't need your point guard to be a wily, thefty.
Safety, you that's not a word.
It's not. I think I was going for
I
thrifty.
understand what you're saying, but it's not a word.
And effective from three. All those things. Ooh, Tech women are on ESPN2 when they're at NC State, but we'll circle back to that as well. The point is the production that they've been getting, particularly out of Kyle Sturdivant, has been very inconsistent, and Davon Smith is still growing, right? It's tough to see after the Miami game, and I want to pull up the score sheet, so that way I have exact numbers and not just Jake vibes from section 213 or whatever.
Doxing yourself there.
Yeah, just a bit. But if you look at Rodney Howard finishing with no points, granted only one field goal attempt, but Kyle Sturdivant 0 for 5, couple assists for Sturdivant, but 2 turnovers each for both of them. That's tough. That's two fifths of your starting lineup that didn't do all that much. And on a night where DeVoe had a quieter night, that's tough. And the shots are going to fall. Like the shot selection, I think has not been that poor, particularly by the young kids. Those will fall. Those will improve, but we do need a baseline consistency that's just better than what we've got.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see if they develop that. Next opponents coming up are Virginia Tech and Clemson later this week. Interesting couple of opponents. Brad Burnell really gave Duke a run for their money, at least in the first half last week. VT has been inconsistent, if I remember correctly. They lost on a buzzer beater to Miami last weekend as well. So, or I think in the midweek as well. So interesting pairing of teams next up. What is your feel on what are you looking for in these next 2 games to say, here's the consistency, or here's at least a sign of life, even if the results aren't going our way?
Hey, the best possible thing that could happen is take a win over Virginia Tech and come home and defend your home court against Clemson.
You really did hit me with they should just win.
I did. But 1-0 would be passable. You want to beat Virginia Tech. They've been kind of down on their luck this year so far. They've also been unlucky. What does that sound like? I think.
They've been historically unlucky. They are near the bottom of the Ken Pom luck chart. I think 4 or 5 from the bottom.
Yeah. So you don't want to be the team where the opponent's luck against VT runs out, but it's a very real possibility. But then again, Clemson's not that bad of a team either. And saying going 2-0 would be the ideal solution, but we just beat a team in Florida State that's not that bad. I think the ACC doesn't have the
ACC is a dumpster fire overall this year, but
I wouldn't say that the quality has been bad. I just think it hasn't been a league where 3 teams are just pantsing everyone, and that's okay. It makes it interesting, and I think that may not get properly reflected at the end of the year. We may not get the due respect just because the rising Duke and UNC tide or UVA tide or whoever isn't lifting all ships. But I literally think this is anyone's conference to win, and Tech is going to figure it out. Granted, it's kind of like a weird spot to say we're supposed to be getting old and staying old. Why are we not seeing more wins or something like that? But quite frankly, with the kids being old, not kind of phasing out at the same time, we're seeing a lot of young players not getting those minutes, and they're going to get those minutes in that playing time. I said this last week. I'm still going to lean on. We just need to see a little bit of improvement each week, and those shots will fall. And making sure we're taking quality shots is a big part of it, but also hoping that baseline consistency gets a little bit better. You can't recruit a new big man in the middle of the year is kind of the long way around to that point.
No midseason transfer window in college basketball, huh?
There's no trade deadline, nothing like that.
Womp, womp. I think we've vamped enough to try to buy time for women's basketball to be over. You feel like it's safe to talk about that game, so let's move on to talk about the women's side of McCamish Pavilion. They dispatched BC earlier this week. Nice and sweet. Took care of business. Lorella Kubai only had a couple points in that game, but she looks healthy, or at least mostly fit. And she's in the game that's in progress in Clemson. She's doing pretty well.
Yeah. Kubai was the leading rebounder, so was not dialed back at all in terms of physicality. So definitely solid to see there. And again, as you noted, she has been playing pretty solid in a pretty balanced scoring night up in Clemson. So not anything to shake a stick at. I think Boston College was a team that has been on the rise. I think that is a very fair way to put it. They're definitely better. They're kind of the dregs of the league there for a little bit, but Cameron Schwartz is an Atlanta freshman, brought in a huge fan group. Obviously, it wasn't a UConn Louisville type crowd size, but we did get a fair amount of fans there midweek. I don't know. It was tough. I think maybe a little bit tougher than, I don't want to say the team expected, but it felt at least a little bit closer than a 19-point game. And Boston College was able to their credit, dial it into about a 12-point game and trending strongly their direction in the third quarter. So.
Yeah, we've talked about the third quarters for this team. I think every time we've done an episode, it's just coming out of half. It's been a bit of a lull every single time. I mean, even today, I guess I can talk about the third quarter now that third quarter itself is over. They were outscored by Clemson in that quarter alone. And Clemson really was able to pull it back to at least reasonable by the time the fourth quarter started. One thing I wanted to note, and we've been talking about lineup rotation all season for this team. One thing the broadcast was noting when I was watching the Clemson game earlier is that Nell has been putting a lot of emphasis on getting as many players minutes as possible in this game. She mentioned that she's not been able to get a lot of these players like Elizabeth Boulane or Aviance Carter, that some of these minutes, especially as we get closer and closer to the end of the season. And we've already talked about this team's depth issues at a couple different positions. So it's good to see, obviously, some of these gals getting minutes, but also getting productive minutes, right? Productive minutes in situations that matter and being effective in those situations.
Yeah. I think it's tough to hear that and then only see Boulane get 4 minutes when Won Aranaz and Carter get 10 and 11. I don't know. I would like to see that spread around a little bit more. It was kind of playing with fire for a lot of the game. Not to be too dramatic or anything like that, but it's
not to be dramatic, but also to be dramatic.
It was a closer game the first three quarters than I think most Tech fans would be comfortable with how, frankly, Clemson has been the past couple seasons, if you will.
Past forever seasons.
I think the important line to take away here is, one, we just talked about how Boston College was not all that good in recent memory until right now, but Tech kind of got pantsed by them
last year
in the game on the road last year, which was very tough to see. And then you come back. Boston College also is firmly in the bracketology picture. It's worth noting this year. So a little bit different to say, hey, we played a competitive 19-point win against them and kind of going from there. But this Georgia Tech team was extremely close to losing 2 of the 3 games we played to Clemson last year. And that team was also not very good. And that is an important, and I don't want to disparage them because, they're an ACC basketball team. They're talented, and there is something to be said about that as we are under a minute here. So hopefully nothing goes too awry as I talk about this. But
no funny business, only 45 seconds.
It's now a 9-point game with 40 seconds left. So gonna have to tighten the old screws and get to the end of the game. But as I was saying, speaking of 9-point deficits with about a minute to play, that's what it took to beat this Clemson team in our own building last year. Like, again, I don't want to say like, oh, just be like the ACC's so deep or something like that, because obviously it's quality conference with quality players, but every team has weaknesses. Every team is fallible. Just because you have a number in front of your name on the bottom line doesn't mean that you're guaranteed anything, right? And that's why it is tough at the same time to be like, we're trying to give the minutes to players who don't see it as much when the game's very much more in doubt, right? This could be a different game, but again, at the same time, you saw Lorella Kubai in with 2 minutes left, and it could have been worse last week. You're lucky everything shakes out, comes out all right, but I don't know. You don't really want to mess around. Obviously Georgia Tech has enough quality wins and has enough talent that we can be confident that if things keep going the way they're going, they're in good shape to make the tournament. But it's still not a great. It's not something you want to take for granted. How's that?
Yeah. So let's talk about that tournament picture for a second. With the release of the first or projected top 16 seed list from the NCAA selection committee, Tech was not on it. Notable rival was in the last couple of slots. What did you make of that? Would you call it a snub? Would you call it a justified decision?
Nope, I would not. I get that we have 4 losses.
You answered no to a multiple choice question.
I would not say it's justified. Georgia Tech has 4 losses this year. Louisville with only 6.
33 seconds left. 33 seconds left in a live game, and they're only up by 8.
Louisville by less than a possession. Purdue by a point, right? Auburn kind of fluky, whatever. And then, what's
Miami by 2.
By 2.
I think it was 2. It was 1 or 2.
This team is 10 points away from being undefeated and has beaten 2 of the teams that they have named as hosts.
Also up by 7, 33 seconds remaining. You're going to have to.
Are we going to have alternate endings to the podcast? It's
a choose your own adventure podcast, as we always do. But no, I mean, it's also hard to be following the play-by-play and also trying to discuss this in good faith. But it's difficult for me to see what basis. I think I'm with you. It's difficult for me to see what basis that decision was made on. If your entire analysis of the Georgia Tech season sort of hinges on that Auburn loss, which, whatever,
or Purdue loss,
sure, or the Miami
loss.
But but sure, fine, whatever. Take those for what they are. But at the same time, if you're going to count those, you also have to count. There's a win versus Georgia. There's a win versus UConn. There's, you also still have to count the almost misses too.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to sort of be like, okay, I'm going to take away credit for this, but also not give you credit for all of this. And it just makes it just very, I'm seeing you die in a real life. it's a very weird dichotomy is the point, as both of us, wow, this is getting dicey, huh?
Yeah, 6-point game with 24 to play.
Wow, this podcast could be off the rails in the next 4 minutes as this game wraps up, or an hour, honestly. So Clemson, we were talking about, that's in progress. 6 seconds, 24 seconds left, or 6 points, 24 seconds left. We'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. Duke is next on the schedule. They get a break for a week after that game, a pretty nice break, especially after some fixture congestion early on in the season.
Make your free throws. Sorry.
All right. And then, like you mentioned earlier, Tech will play NC State on ESPN2 in the Play for K game. That one's in Raleigh. That, I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts on what that matchup looks like right now.
Yeah.
Look away from the monitor. I'm begging you.
I can't.
I have the score on my phone next to me. You'll be fine. Just play with the producer here.
Yeah. This is more emotion than y'all usually get in a podcast, I think.
We're never doing this again. We're letting the games go final and then recording.
Anyways, the Play for K game. NC State is a very good team. No kidding, Jake. What an observation.
I don't think they've dropped a game yet. Still.
Yeah. But Georgia Tech is not a stranger to beating a very good NC State team in their own building. You can say, oh man, that team could have made a deep tournament run. They had Francesca Pon or whatever. Whatever. Also we win. Thank goodness. Sorry.
And release.
But this Georgia Tech team is arguably more talented than that one. More experienced one is inarguable. They are absolutely more experienced. So you got to look at it and say, if that team can do it, why not this one? If half of our team could almost beat number 3 Louisville, and at the time number 3 Louisville, why can't this one? The clear tiers of the ACC the last 3 or 4 years has been NC State and Louisville, and then miasma
Florida State and UNC and Georgia Tech in some sort of podcasting is a visual medium, but both of us are doing jazz hands at each other.
Yeah.
A miasma.
In the soup, if you will, of the second tier of the ACC. But this Georgia Tech team is a top 15 team for a reason. They're very talented. They deserve that ranking. And obviously there's been some misses we've alluded to a couple times in here, but the tables don't turn until you actually turn them over, right? An almost win against Louisville it's not a win. No kidding. This is great content here. But Georgia Tech is a good team, and if they want to be a great team, they need to go and win on the road, right? It's one thing to just say, just get a good seed in the ACC tournament and play then, or get a good seed in the NCAA tournament and ride it then. No, you gotta, if you want to have that respect from the media that you're perceived as slighted right now, there's some level of, okay, go and win the game. Go beat NC State.
Okay. No, it sounds easy enough. Easier said than done. How does this sort of bruising brand of defense match up with the way that NC State likes to play?
Well, NC State has one of the most prolific scorers in the history of the conference, but you saw a UNC team that had been scoring like 60, 70 something points a game.
UNC was like 4th in the nation in scoring offense, or something ridiculous.
They were held to 38. And obviously there's some oversimplification to saying defense wins championships. It's probably the most overused cliche in sports. Probably. I don't know. Somebody out there fact check me. I don't know the numbers on cliches.
Don't look at the 2022 national championship game anyway.
Yeah. But if you can stop somebody from scoring, that is extremely effective. It's just a matter of, the reason they're a great team and a top 5 team is they've got a good defense too. And I'm a little bit more nervous with how our offense stacks up against an elite or even very good defense versus our ability to stop theirs. Because I think NC State can win in a shootout. They can win by a little. They can win by a lot. I'm not trying to riff off the shutdown full cast
Bedlam.
but really that's what you see when you go up against obviously Notre Dame isn't quite what they were a couple of years ago, but you'd have them in the top tier mix as well in 2017-18. But if you're going up against those Notre Dame teams, these Louisville or NC State teams, they can win by a little, they can win by a lot. Women's basketball is a very stratified sport, and there's a pretty, in my opinion, big difference between being a top 10 team and being a top 20 team.
Okay. Good ESPN broadcaster analysis. I appreciate it.
I mean, I'm an amateur podcaster.
Amateur podcaster, high fidelity amateur podcaster. I think that's it for us. Now that women's basketball is over for the night, that was a 69-62 win over Clemson away at Clemson. Tech is now 17-4 on the year. I think that is 6-2 in the ACC.
6-2 or 7-2.
6-2. So we already talked about their schedule coming up. That's Duke and NC State over the next couple weeks. So we'll do probably a more formal preview of the NC State game when that's next on the docket. Anything else to round out an hour of podcasting?
Golf comes back this week, so good for them. I'm excited. They're good. I want to see them do well.
And the baseball and softball are on the horizon. We should have some preview content next week.
Hopefully.
Audio recorded, hopefully, if we can figure out some scheduling. But, I think that's it for us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will talk to you next week.